Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here, joined today by Tade Oyerinde, who's the founder and chancellor of an organization called Campus. We're going to be digging into opening up pathways, scaling access into rapid programs developed kind of like community college. Tade is going to talk to us all about that in a bit. Before we get into that, we want to welcome you to the show. Tade, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thanks for having me, Michael, and good job. You nailed my last name.
It took practice, and there may be even an additional take in there for those of you who are not listening live. But yeah, it's wonderful to have you on. We always like to get to know our guests better right at the top. Can you share with us your origin story, how you got to this point in your professional life?
Yeah, it's been a long and windy road. To go back to my childhood, I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. It's Nigerian parents, so I'm Nigerian American. Got a twin brother and an older sister who's brilliant. And so my parents decided, okay, well, let's homeschool because my sister was going to be slowed down in school, in public school or private school. And so we were homeschooled until high school.
Mm.
The three of us. My parents were, much to their disappointment, Tosh, my twin brother, and I didn't quite reach my sister's level, but we were homeschooled nonetheless. I think that's actually where a lot of my ideas around education come from.
Mm.
Like we had a very non-traditional K-12 experience, or at least K through 8 experience. So I've always had a fairly unique lens on what education could look like.
Mm.
And then my mother was also getting her master's and eventually her PhD or her doctorate of education while she was homeschooling us. And so it was like fairly experimental.
Yes.
So she would, she'd articulate, hey guys, I'm going to try this experiment,
Yeah.
this model.
Right.
Let's see if this works.
I think parents of twins, you have an N of two. You right away, you have an experimental and a control group,
Exactly. And then on top of that, she's just a tinkerer. So her and my father were very open-minded about their approach to educating. And so it's hard to imagine how that didn't have any impact on my psyche and my approach. So I think it's likely that had a big role in, my taking a curiosity into education, and then also this more of a out of the box approach to how education can be done. So eventually, I went to flight school. I was going to be a pilot. And then decided that instead I actually wanted to be an aerospace engineer. So I studied aerospace engineering for 3 years and started a company when I was an undergrad. Building a social discovery platform is what we called it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with chat roulette, but it was we called it uni roulette.
I see.
It was kind of like chat roulette, but you had to have a university email to get on. And so ended up going full time on that. Investors came, gave us some money, but said you had to take a leave of absence to university, so I did. And it's been that was a long time. It was 2012.
You kind of Zuckerberg, it sounds like. You pulled a bit of a Zuckerberg there.
I thought I was going to be the Black Zuckerberg when I took a leave of absence, but the company didn't end up working out. It was a fad. It was like we grew really quickly for 7 months, and then all the growth fell off a cliff. When I saw this happening with Clubhouse, I was like, man, I know how this story ends. It's really tricky here. And, for a different podcast, I can go into all the nuances of what we tried and what didn't work. But eventually, the thing we actually did have that had value was an engineering team that was pretty good at building iOS and Android apps, which by 2014 was actually a pretty valuable skill set. Every university in the world thought, okay, we need to be in the App Store. We don't know exactly what the app needs to do, but we know we need the App Store. So we went around and basically became a consulting firm building apps for universities, simple things so the students can see the dining hall menu or events happening on campus.
Your point's also a good one. Even just the brand halo effect of actually being competent enough in 2015 for university of whatever to actually have an app that is connected to student life. That in and of itself, you're kind of like breaking ground as a digital organization.
Yeah, there were only a few players back then. And so that's how I got into Edtech, specifically, really building custom solutions for universities. My brother got bored and decided to go back. He was at Oxford when we were doing our first company, or he went back and did that. And then my friend went to go work at one of our other friends' companies. And I decided to go full-time on education technology. So that's kind of how I got into education technology.
And then that ultimately has led you of late to be focused on campus. And also your role, your job title is interesting in that you're the founder and chancellor. So you've gone into the education space pretty fully on this venture. Can you talk to us about the problem space, why you wound up focusing on what you're focused on for
Sure.
campus?
Sure. So it's a pretty weird and fascinating journey that we've been on. So in 2016, I actually started Campus Wire as a software business.
Mm,
The basic vision for Campus Wire was in the same way as Slack was taking over in the workplace,
mhm.
Discord was taking over for gamers,
Yep,
real time chat was replacing email as the communication modality.
yep,
Someone should create a really great, robust, modern communication platform for online classes. And
yep,
so I kind of had this idea since I was a kid using Skype and homeschool sometimes.
yeah,
I was like, what would it look like to design something like this for higher ed?
yeah,
So
yeah,
Zoom plus Slack, but way better for higher
yeah.
ed use cases.
Mhm.
And so wrote code for a couple of years. And then we decided we didn't want to sell it to the universities themselves. I don't know if you could tell from my personality, but the enterprise sales cycle, it's not really
Right.
it's not really what
Plus
I'm,
the homeschooling, a little bit outside the institution. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
yeah. So our approach was let's go directly to faculty.
Mm,
And so let's sell to faculty at some institutions, faculty have budget within the department to actually procure software.
yeah.
The faculty would actually require that their students will pay for it like a textbook. So we
Mm,
had some functionality that replaced functionality that they were already charging students for. So like clickers, those like the
sure.
iClicker and
Like
that.
audience response stuff. Yep. Mhm.
Well, we built that into the platform as well. So
Yeah.
they felt comfortable replacing the clicker and having students procure it. But I used to fly around the country and I'd meet these professors and I'd sort of get in the room with them and show them our software. And it was 2018. I was at UCLA and I get into this professor's office and he's got an air mattress off to the side. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And he's like, oh, I'm an adjunct professor. I make like
Mm,
44 grand a year, 42 grand a year. Like I can't afford to live anywhere near Westwood. I live 5 hours away, drive up, sleep in my office Monday through Friday, and I go back out for the weekend. And I was just completely mind blown. I was
yeah.
like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like shocked. Like UCLA is one of the greatest institutions in the country.
Yeah.
It's not an inexpensive school. Like, how is this happening? And so that's how I discovered what I call the adjunct faculty crisis. I actually came across a Berkeley study that found that 1 in 4 adjunct professors in the US lives on at least one government assistance program,
Mm,
food,
mhm.
housing. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
this is really hard to sort of grasp and imagine and just totally shocking. The second thing that I discovered through that approach of working with professors and serving with Campus Wire was what I call the sort of community college low completion rate problem.
Yep.
So we just saw in the data that students at four-year universities were far more likely to keep using Campus Wire for months and months and semester after semester.
Right.
Students at two-year schools, they barely use us after 30 days.
Mhm.
And at first we thought, is something broken with the tech? It turns out, most students who go to community college are going to drop out with no degree, no credential. They're not going to transfer into 4 year. They're just going to drop out.
Mm,
About 2/3
mhm.
are gonna just drop out with no degree and never get a bachelor's or an associate's. And so it's like, wow, what would it look like to try and solve both of these problems at the same time?
Mhm.
Help adjuncts at top universities who are, in my experience, very often the best, most passionate teachers,
Right.
and then help them earn better by teaching this community college population. And so the first thing we did was we looked around and said, okay, are there any examples of community colleges that have very high relative to the sort of national average associate's degree completion rates,
Yeah.
graduation rates. And so
Right.
we
Right.
came across the City University of New York.
Yeah, shout out to
Uh,
CUNY. I have to shout out to CUNY. My wife is
uh,
an employee of Queens College, which is part of the CUNY system. Thank you for their service. Yes, yes.
very grateful for their service and their leadership on this issue. With their ASAP program, they've demonstrated now relatively at scale, about 70,000 students have gone through the program, that you can achieve about 51% graduation rates by doing a few things. They give every student a Metro card.
Mhm.
They pair up the student with a support coach, basically who has only 100 other students or 99 other students, and whose job is to help you, get through, navigate college.
Yep.
And then they require the students to be full-time enrolled, which is
Mm,
key.
mhm.
I think psychologically, the students say, hey, I'm actually going to do this full-time. This is an important priority. In addition to my work, I'm going to prioritize school. And then they made it sort of the tuition inclusive of all the fees and below the Pell Grant, which is
Right.
very important because most of
Right.
these students aren't Pell eligible, and nickeling and diming them for fees can actually, cause a major barrier to be erected that leads to them dropping out. So we basically said, what would it look like to build within an existing community college ASAP as the model to serve
Yep.
this population of students, but then add powered by adjunct faculty from, the top 100 universities in the country. So that's the idea for campus.edu.
Mhm.
And so we actually acquired a small community college in Sacramento about a year and a half ago, within which we've been executing on this strategy. So that's what we're up to.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. It does immediately bring me to when you're starting something new, the opportunity to do things differently. And in particular, in the post pandemic world, the way people think about hybrid learning, online learning, whether you need to be constrained by a campus, your named campus, So I'm sure you've thought about this, but I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think new about the use of a physical campus, how that connects to online learning. You're the chancellor, how you're kind of designing the vision really here for how you might deliver community college capabilities with high completion rates at scale.
Sure. I mean, the first bet that we made early on was that community college was going to be a primarily online endeavor
Hmm.
post pandemic. If you think about four-year university, it's a dating app. My mom always wanted me to find a wife at university. It's a friend finder because you
Yeah.
don't leave with lifelong relationships. It's about brand and prestige, that can help unlock a specific tier of employment opportunities. It's all these additional things that will require, I think, some in-person component.
Hmm.
Community college, on the other hand, is less of a country club for young people and more of a, like, you're here to learn, you're here to get your associate's degree and then transfer or get a job right away. It's a bit more transactional at times. And specifically, I mean, the vast majority of community college students are commuters. They don't live on campus. There's no sports clubs or
Right.
sports teams.
Also, just to jump in, as I understand it, a lot of them might already have full time jobs. They also may have
Most of them are working
family commitments. There's a different profile. You mentioned Pell Grants.
complex lives.
Yes. And then online allows for more scheduling flexibility and access flexibility that make it
It's more accessible.
yeah. Hmm.
That was the whole initial obsession that I developed over this problem space was how can we make community college more accessible, but with high graduation rates?
Yep.
And if you looked into the data, it was clear that asynchronous online courses were never going to deliver anywhere near 50%. They won't even get to 30%
Hmm.
completion rate. Look at all the big MOOCs,
Right.
completion rate of 5% or below.
Hmm.
And so the interesting insight about COVID was that we really had a large introduction to synchronous online learning. Prior to the
Right.
pandemic, vast majority of online learning was asynchronous.
Yep.
The idea was, well, what if you could deliver high quality synchronous online learning
Hmm.
to still engage students and therefore deliver better graduation rates,
Hmm.
hopefully replicating the success of CUNY's ASAP program, but then still with the accessibility of traditional online. And that's kind of the vision. So with campus, we provide every student with a laptop. About a third of our students, we actually give them a Wi-Fi enabled laptop. If their Wi-Fi at home is too slow, we provide them math and writing tutoring. Of course, faculty from top 100 universities. And basically, we try and provide all the wraparound supports that they're going to need to graduate at above 50%. That's the goal, is to replicate the success of CUNY's ASAP program, but at scale.
Yeah. The synchronous part is something I spent a lot of my career at Kaplan working specifically on what we called live online. And it was always that the world wasn't ready. And then suddenly it was, suddenly the great stampede of 2020, where every higher ed class had to go into an online, really into a Zoom room for the most part. And it was a little bit of a survival of the fittest. It was a little bit of a chaotic situation. But to your point, through that trial by fire, there was an emerging class of adjunct like talent who were also training up on the online format. And what's nice about that is the constraints you might have around, I don't know if I can get Tade to teach this class in Sacramento on Thursday night. Once you go online, you can teach from anywhere and you can reach anyone really around the globe. What's that been like? 'Cause it sounds like you've been out in this space really through this transition. The other element is what I've heard referred to as digital readiness or digital inclusion, where when the pandemic started, there was some real even public health challenges around access to the internet, access to online. We've cleared a lot of those hurdles, and it sounds like you've been very intentional in your design, where the fact that you're giving, even in some cases, Wi-Fi enabled laptops. What's it been like watching that problem space? It feels as though we've actually made real progress in terms of figuring out how to get people access to online really over the last, say, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, there's been a lot of investment in broadband, like at the government level. There've been, I think, a lot of
Yeah.
strides that have been made over the
Hmm.
last few years.
Even the
I
stimulus
think,
package, right? That was part of it.
yeah, absolutely. I also think in terms of faculty and student desires, it's night and day
Mm.
compared to sort of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Like pre-pandemic, like a sort of infinitesimal number of faculty were interested in actually teaching all sort of synchronous online classes, at least from these top 100 universities. It wasn't
Yeah.
really something that anyone had in their mind as a possibility.
Hmm.
Now we find faculty all the time who are looking, from Princeton, from UCLA, from Morehouse University, who are looking for
Hmm.
synchronous online teaching opportunities. And I think that's a big part of what enables campus today that didn't exist pre-pandemic. And
Right.
then of course, student side, previously students had a very negative perception of online learning. It's kind of a joke. You can get your dog to do your homework and nobody knows. I think now there's like a perception of synchronous online learning where you can actually get to meet these professors. It's not like a MOOC where it's like I'm learning from a professor at Princeton, but
Right.
you never actually meet them. They never know your name.
Yeah.
You're going to spend 3 hours with them, with 50 other, 50 other, 60 other kids in the class.
Yeah.
You can go to office hours. You can build relationships with them. And by the way, if you knock it out of the park, you can ask for a letter of recommendation when you want to transfer into a 4 year, and they can actually write it for you. So I think the pandemic really enabled, sort of the opportunity that we're seeing now. And it really did shift students' expectations around online. My hypothesis there has been proven true at this point. In California, about 40% of community college students are enrolled exclusively in online courses.
Mm.
And then it's two numbers, and one in the 30s, the other in the lower 30s of students. About 37% of students are doing hybrid, and then maybe 33% are doing only in person. So it's really divided, but solely online is the plurality experience now for community college in California. And I think as we see the numbers come out from every state, they're going to reflect a similar pattern.
Yeah. Dwayne Matthews is someone I follow on LinkedIn, and he was just writing an article about what he called stranded brilliance. And when I was thinking about that turn of phrase, which I really like, it reminded me very much of the work that you're doing, where it does feel like prior to a technical conduit, a way to kind of connect these two groups, there was this wasted, untapped teaching potential among your adjuncts. And then there was this unreached population of folks, because even, beyond the folks who had to shift maybe to go online, there's also folks who maybe otherwise couldn't have had access to instruction if they didn't have online. If you're stuck at home, if you're traveling, there are different ways in which the access is really more fully enabled. How do you think about that through like an equity lens? Because it does feel like there's maybe some perception stuff and some sort of mental model work that needs to be done for folks to understand really the pathway is here online. But I think on the other side, it does feel like you can really unlock some untapped potential in some meaningful ways.
No, I think that's right for sure. I'd say a couple of things. First is one of the major advantages of synchronous online is that you're no longer limited to learn from the people in your neighborhood, the
Mhm.
best professor at X in your
Yep.
neighborhood. Now learn from the best professor at X, basically in your time zone or the three neighboring time zones.
Right.
And that's a fundamentally transformative development because with students, keeping them motivated, especially for the community college population, is half of the ballgame. It's really half the ballgame. And when you can say, hey, you can learn from a Howard University professor, it fundamentally shifts their excitement, their
Mhm.
optimism, their ability to envision a better life for themselves versus just saying you can learn from the local person at, down the street. And so
Mhm.
I think that really does unlock a lot of opportunity. It's definitely not homogenous across the states. There are amazing institutions. If you're lucky enough to live in New York City, you have CUNY. If you live in Miami, you have Miami-Dade, an amazing institution. If you're in Dallas, you have Dallas College. Again, so it's very heterogeneous. But
Hmm.
if you're in rural Arkansas, the nearest community college may be 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
And genuinely may not be one person there who knows full stack software development,
Right.
what to teach you Python or whatever the
Hmm.
entry level programming course you need is. And so it really does increase access. And then on the faculty side, these adjunct professors, they've got a real challenge. And a majority of professors today at most of our universities are adjuncts. And so question is, how do we ensure that adjuncts can have a stable income and they can still get all the benefits of working at, Princeton or Columbia, whatever it is, and, prestige, the sort of intellectual stimulation of being a part of that faculty base
Yeah.
and sort of congregating with like-minded peers. But then, if there's a way that faculty can do what some folks are calling gig work
You're right.
on the side,
Hmm.
teaching on campus, that's great for everybody. And then
Yeah.
you unlock access to those professors. You shouldn't have to be able to get into Columbia University to learn from a Columbia University professor.
Right.
And that's kind of our thinking here at campus is what would it look like for everybody in the country to get to learn from amazing faculty? And it's not just, oh, all faculty at top 100 universities are amazing. That's not the case. And it's also true that there are many great faculty at local community colleges.
Right.
However, what we tried to do is find the best teachers at these top universities.
Mm.
Being from a top university is primarily about inspiring their students to dream bigger and think farther than they otherwise would. And then on top of that, we look for great teachers, people who love teaching, who are genuinely passionate about helping students grasp these complex concepts and get confident in their mastery of the material. That should be something everyone has access to. Everyone in the country should access these great faculty.
Yeah. Makes sense. And it's also the dynamics. It brought me immediately to sort of the notion of coaching or the guide on the side versus the sage on the stage, where when you're synchronous, what you're looking for in some ways is, does my teacher know me? Are we connecting in an authentic human way in real time? We made it this far without me talking about AI, but there I did it. It is a time where, stuff can become very depersonalized. It's tough to kind of reach this population and get them to stick and believe in themselves and motivate. Can you give us a little more on the motivational element and how that maybe factors into how you train and develop your faculty?
Well, my contrarian bet here is that the more AI we have, the more important humans become at certain things. And I
Mhm.
think education is chief among them. Our goal is how do we leverage AI to do all of the things that humans shouldn't have to do so that we can free up humans' time to do all the things that humans are best at doing. And so building a relationship, you're not going to build a relationship with your AI professor, at least not this generation, maybe like 3 generations from now, that
Right.
might be a real thing. But, we're looking to build relationships with real human beings who know our feelings, who understand, what we're going through. One of the things we've found in our data is that faculty who represent the lived experiences of our students
Mhm.
have much higher likelihood of having better student evaluations, but also students just basically building a deeper relationship with them. If
Right.
you're a first generation student,
Mhm.
first in your family to go to university, and you're talking to a professor who's like, oh, I know what that was like. I've been where you're at. Like that creates a bridge between the faculty and the students that we've seen such a powerful driver that helps improve those persistence rates.
Mhm.
So I don't see how in our lifetime or in the near term, at least with the generation that we're currently teaching and we'll be teaching for the next few generations, AI is going to replace that. It's really about how do we leverage AI to make sure that the FAFSA is submitted correctly so we don't have to
Yeah.
waste time checking, rechecking, and re-verifying. How do we use AI to, automate attendance tracking and some of those more mundane aspects of running a college class?
Mhm.
That frees up professors' time to interface with students, build relationships with students. That's what I think we're really excited about.
Yeah. Two other elements I wanna make sure we touch on. One is the skills and the competencies that you're teaching, the domains that are emerging as you're thinking about this population. They're taking classes, and those classes are typically aligned with the future of work in some sense. This is about really a pathway to more earning potential, better career upside. So I want to get into that first. And then since you're more on the EdTech platform side, I'd love to hear a little more about the platform perhaps after that. What about the experience are you focused on? I was really struck by the connections to social platforms and stuff that folks are using in the rest of their lives, it does seem like you have kind of a window into that. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little more about how you think about how the skills workers need are
Sure.
changing really fast and how campus can perhaps help with that whole problem.
You just said it, Michael. I think it's changing so fast. It's really hard to teach to a speeding bullet. If we built curriculum, I think ChatGPT turned a year today.
Yes.
If we built curriculum, 9 months ago, based on the state of the art at the time, it would almost at least half of it would be obsolete today.
Yeah.
So part of what's challenging is like, how do we, teach in the way that's sufficiently abstract that what we're teaching is going to be relevant for the next 5 years, 10
Hmm.
years.
Hmm.
Students are going to be going to the workforce. It's not a solved problem. These are like, if you could be a fly on the wall here at our office, and we're debating these things every single day.
Yeah.
What we've started with is just to have a course that's compulsory for all students that come through campus, which is AI skills.
Mm.
And so we've taken the approach of this is a powerful new technology, and any kid who comes to campus and complete the campus is going to be amongst the most proficient at utilizing these tools, no matter what they do, whether they go to
Mm.
a 4 year school or they go start working right away.
Mm.
And at that course level, we're reevaluating every month, like what are the latest and greatest developments in leveraging these AI tools, and how do we make sure that our students in this one course AI skills that they're learning them. That's something that we're doing today. Longer term, we are looking at sort of more long term process of what does it mean to have an associate degree of business in a world where AI and large language models make it very easy for certain business functions to be operated. What does marketing look like
Right.
when you can generate marketing ideas by asking a question to
Hmm.
artificial intelligence? What does business law look like?
Entrepreneurship is an interesting space as well, I
Absolutely.
imagine.
What is on? I mean, what are all these dimensions of business, or a paralegal program? What does that look like? Or a full stack software engineering program that we're launching next year? What does full stack software engineer need to be in a world where it can help you write code? It's actually interesting. About 20%, more than 20% of our code written last month was written by AI. That
Mm.
that we ship, that our engineering team ships. So it's like, what does an entry level programmer look like now in this
Right.
world? Do you need to know how to use Copilot? Is that a core competency? I think it certainly is. And so we're constantly reevaluating these things. We're constantly debating these things. We're definitely, as an institution, leaning in. We're not, saying, how do we ban this or block this or anything like
Right.
that?
Right.
But, but there's still a lot of unsolved problems and open debates, to be honest.
Yeah, and I imagine you have one of your advantages against the more standard institutional model is that you're coming out of software development, product development, mindset where you can pivot fast, you can try to get experimental cycles out there and then learn from them and continue to iterate. That seems very contrary to the way a lot of the establishment within higher ed operates. Can you expand a little on that? Because I imagine, I still think of that as a solopreneur. I can pivot super fast because I just go wherever I want to go. But I imagine when you're
Yeah.
lean and you're coming from sort of that software development, agile, listening to your customers kind of framework, I imagine, a lot of what I see in higher ed is older institutions trying to adopt that mindset, but you're kind of coming in with that mindset fresh.
Yeah, we're attempting every day to just do what's best for students and make sure that our students are maximally prepared either to transfer into a 4 year school and be successful or to start working right away. Long term, that's the only thing that really matters in terms of our brand and in terms of our success.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of our faculty model, working with these amazing adjuncts, is the people who want to teach on campus. Yeah, they're making some sort of incremental income, but really they're excited about future of higher ed, and they see this as an innovative model.
Mm.
And we rely on them heavily for pretty much everything that we do. We put a faculty member who's going to be the program director for every degree that we offer, who's in charge of making sure that they're constantly reevaluating efficacy of the programs, and then of course the utility of the program in a dynamic employment world. I got to say, we're super lucky to have amazing faculty from all over the country with different perspectives that sort of lead that process for us.
Yeah. And I know you're tapped in. You have some high profile investors in Silicon Valley and what's emerging there. Where do you look for inspiration outside of education? How are you connecting the dots there, it does seem like in some ways maybe you're a conduit for some of the more innovative thinking around upside in technology ventures, maybe applying some of that moonshot thinking to some real problems like the ones you're addressing with campus.
I think moonshot thinking is the perfect way to put it. It's what attracts everyone who's involved, from the employees here at campus to our investors, like the founder of ChatGPT, the founder of Discord, the Bloomberg Ventures, and others, to our board of trustees, former or current presidents from Morehouse, Miami-Dade College, LaGuardia College in the CUNY system, Dallas
Mm.
College. Like, these folks are all looking for a moonshot. The fundamental reality is our higher education system hasn't benefited from much of the increased potential that technology has afforded us over the last 20 years.
Mhm.
We've not fundamentally exploited internet. We've not fundamentally exploited mobile phones, laptops, broadband. We have to figure out how to get all those increased advantages into higher ed. That's kind of like high level, I think, what excites the Silicon Valley folks. You
Mhm.
know, again, most people are still learning at community colleges from the best person in their neighborhood.
Right.
And in some cases, that's a great teacher. In other cases, it's not. How do we make sure that everybody, regardless of your geographic location, gets to learn from the best teachers of computer science or business or marketing or entrepreneurship, period? That's a big piece. And then the key thing that I think aligned everyone was major frustration around debt. You can't look at America's higher education system without being really frustrated and maybe disgusted
Mm.
by, what we're forcing students to do. We're forcing, in many cases, students to say, hey, if you want to get a great job, you want to build a great life, you want to have a great career, you have to go to this, get this degree. And for most students, you're going to have to take on debt to do it.
Right.
That's not a sustainable approach. It's not reasonable.
Right. Especially when, to your point, a lot of community college students aren't even finishing. So, like, they're just taking on the debt with no return on that
That's the
exposure,
worst.
you know?
That's the worst of the worst, is the folks who take on the loans and don't get the increased earning potential by actually completing the degree. That's
Right.
the worst of the worst. And that should be banned, that should be eliminated as quickly as humanly possible. And so the good news is our government already has a pretty generous package to support students. It's
Yeah.
called the Pell Grant. It's needs-based, $7,495 a year, and more than half of community college students are eligible for it. Problem is, you know, far too few institutions either get the completion rates right, like the 4 years do, but then the 4 years can't figure out how to lower their tuition, that threshold, while still supporting their business model. And so it's like, well, how can we learn from the best of what the 4 years are doing and the best of what the community colleges are doing, and sort of keep the cost structure below that Pell Grant threshold,
Yeah.
then increase the completion rates towards the 4 year levels, and hopefully eventually get into the 60s. That's the goal here of campus. That's like a big idea that excites people outside of education. We do have great education investors like Matt Greenfield and Rethink Education, or Way and her team at Reach, and others. But I think fixing education for higher ed, making it more accessible to the students who currently it's not serving consistently well,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that excites, Sam Altman and
Yeah.
Berg folks and everybody else just as much.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, going a little deeper on the software side, anything around the experience, we're recording this in Zoom. I imagine there are lots of places where you're trying to get to feature parity and just make sure it all works and it's integrated together. But what about the actual experience of a live online classroom? What kind of functionality you're looking at? What kind of user experience stuff are you really focused on there?
Yeah, there's a lot. It's really about two things. The first is active learning. So, sort of sage on the stage, as you called it earlier, that's not going to work in online. In online, I can just tab and I can be on Netflix in literally 1 second. Like, you can't do that. You've got to keep the students engaged. And this is something we work with faculty. There are many great teachers who don't necessarily have all of the active learning built into their toolkit. And so we help
Mhm.
them master the sort of active learning approach. And that basically means, you're keeping your lecturers engaging by asking students to participate. You're
Mhm.
polling them with questions in real time. Again, full circle. This is how we got started. You're having them talk to your neighbor, just like in church growing up in Atlanta. Turn to your neighbor and say neighbor, like, we do all that stuff and we help the faculty master those tools. Still a long way to go. There's so
Yeah.
much to build. If you see our roadmap, I have 5 years worth of tech that we need to improve and build. But I think really thinking through how do we make sure that this feels a little bit more like a learning game show
Mm.
that student is really participating in than a traditional sage on the stage or a lecture. I think that's a big part of it. And then additionally, I think the second piece is really about making sure that faculty and success coaches have the tools that they need to evaluate what students are doing and where
Yeah.
struggling and,
Mm.
and prevent sort of those dropout, stop out scenarios. There's some disadvantages to being online, even in a synchronous environment,
Mhm.
many advantages. And one of the most important is you can measure things more effectively. So we know not just, okay, did student Michael Palmer, did he attend class, but did he actually like raise his hand? Did he actually like speak?
Of course he
Um,
did. Come on. Of course. Who you think you're dealing with? But yes, absolutely. Yeah.
right. And it's like, okay, in a physical room, you can talk to your neighbor, but what if your neighbor is not that interesting? Okay, well, in a virtual classroom, we can, talk to your neighbor, but then, we can switch your neighbor around whenever
Yeah.
we want, and you can talk to different people, get different perspectives. And so it's really about giving the faculty access to that data to say, hey, I know that Michael's always talking in class, so I'm going to go to Jennifer and I'm
Yeah.
going to go to Ivy and I'm going to get them to participate.
That sounds like a smart move from my perspective. That's amazing. And then, we always like to look out ahead, what emerging technology. We talked a little bit about AI. It sounds like you're pretty plugged into what's emerging and what the future of learning, future of education, future of work might be. Looking a little bit further out ahead, whether it's specifically for campus or more where you see higher ed or education, even the homeschool angle, I think is really interesting. But is there anything out there trend wise, anything you're noticing that's getting your wheels turning when you think about where education is heading?
Oh, I mean, there's loads. I think dual enrollment, speaking of homeschool,
Mm,
is really exciting. We actually have about 50 dual enrollment students. These are homeschool high schoolers
mm.
who are taking classes on campus, learning from these amazing faculty and really getting a taste of college, getting a head start on college. So I think that's really exciting. And I hope that that continues. And that's not just something that's happening at campus. If you look across higher ed at the community college enrollment, dual enrollment's the fastest growing sector of community college enrollment. So I think that's a national trend that'll persist.
Hmm.
I also think that the skills that we need, entry level workers to have and to master are shifting, and they're shifting pretty quickly. And so I think that means two things. The first is, of course, we need to train and teach towards, where the skills requirements are going to be, not where they
Right.
are.
You're gonna make me quote Wayne Gretzky, but I'll hold off.
Skate to where the puck is
Ski
moving, not where
Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Great rugby code. That's key. But I also think that it's also going to mean that people who are 5, 6, 7, 10 years into their career are going to have to come back and pick up some of these new skills.
mm,
And they're going to have to do it quickly. And it's going to have to be convenient. It's going to have to be affordable.
right.
It's not going to require waiting until the fall semester and then paying a huge lump sum of money to go
Mm,
and take on a master's degree. There's going to have to be a much more flexible and nimble way
yeah,
to stay relevant and sort of update and refresh our skills. So we think a lot about that. What do certificates look like that roll up into associate's degrees, and how
mm,
do we make sure our associate's degrees roll up in the 4 year? So I think those are probably two of the things that are most exciting coming down the pipeline.
yeah, and I could imagine how campus CDU could play a role in that kind of mid-career. Pretty much everyone nowadays needs the AI basics course you were describing. That's part of your community college, and then the profile of a community college student, to me, seems a little closer to the lifelong learner, certainly than the four-year residential undergrad. But really fascinating stuff. I'm talking to Tade Oyerinde from Campus EDU. It's been a wonderful conversation. If folks want to learn more, it's campus.edu is the website. Tade, thank you so much for joining. But as we wrap up, I always like to give some takeaways to our listeners who stuck around with us this far. Is there anything you want to put some emphasis on or bring home your final closing remarks here as we wrap up today's show?
I think there's a lot of work to be done. If you're working in education, if you're an entrepreneur, roll up your sleeves, come and help. I think, taking big swings like this is really important for our country and for the world. And I think folks are surprised, kind of back to your question around some of the investors we've been able to bring on board. People care about education. It's something that everybody cares about,
Mhm.
but it's going to take new thinking and new people and new approaches combined with old thinking, old people and old approaches. That's kind of, the holy grail. We decided to acquire this college and do all of this within the confines of
Right.
an accredited institution,
Mhm.
advancing its existing sort of mission, as opposed to starting a new
Mhm.
college boot
Right.
camp
I mean,
like that.
you're a chancellor. Like, that's an intentional choice to choose those approaches, right?
A deliberate choice to work within the regulatory framework. I think accreditation, I think the sort of traditional higher education approach combined with this innovative, fast moving approach is the winning formula. I guess I just leave people with that. I think it's the combination of the two. There have been too many examples of Silicon Valley folks who completely dismissed traditional higher ed, and I think they've been wrong. And then, of course, there's too many folks in traditional higher ed who are completely resisting, the new technologies that we have. But our goal is to sort of build a new model, and demonstrate its efficacy, and then hopefully more and more institutions can replicate, what we've done, just as we were inspired by ASAP. So I guess that would be my final thought. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, fantastic stuff with Tade Oyerinde, who's the founder and chancellor of campus.edu. Check it out. Find out what they got going on if you're interested in adjuncting, and they pay well, which is great. Tade, thanks again for joining me on today's show. And for our listeners, thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe, write reviews, do all the good things. This is Trending in Education.